Good morning, Dr. Jagdish.
Good morning, ma'am. Good morning. Thank
Thank
you.
you so much for agreeing to speak at the Early Intervention Summit 2020. We are so honored that you're going to talk about how important, how we take care of NICU babies and how important early intervention is for NICU babies. So I'm going to read out your profile so that everybody knows about your background and qualifications. So Dr. Jagdish is currently practicing as a senior consultant, neonate and pediatric early interventionist, neurodevelopmental disabilities at Department of Pediatrics, Apollo Institute of Medical Sciences and Research, Apollo Health City, Hyderabad. He is one of the few certified master trainers in autism tools, INDT, ASD, and ISA in pediatric neurology from AIMS, New Delhi. He is also a master trainer in early intervention in developmental disabilities. He is specialized in neurodevelopmental assessment, planning, and early intervention to IUGR for children at risk and high risk in 0 to 3 years of age in NICU in outpatient basis. His main areas of interest are ASD, ADHD, SLD, CP, neurodevelopmental and neuromuscular disorders, and their early therapeutic interventional programs. Early detection and management of developmental delays, including developmental disabilities, motor, sensory, visual, cognitive, speech, language, hearing, genetic, and multiple disabilities are also his areas of interest and work. Over to you, Dr. Jagdish. Please start your presentation.
Thank you very much, madam, for briefing about me and welcome. My presentation is on neurodevelopmental follow-up and early intervention for high-risk NICU graduates. This is a very, very important topic which has to be conveyed and disseminated among the medical as well as paramedical fraternity. And I'm from Apollo Hospital. So my mission statement is, our mission is to bring healthcare international standards within the reach of every individual. We are committed to the achievement and maintenance of excellence in education, research, and healthcare of the benefit of humanity. This is our founder chairman's Dr. Pratap C. Reddy statement. And this is our Department of Pediatrics team, the Apollo Institute of Medical Science and Research, Hyderabad. And this is Dr. P. Sudarshan Reddy, our head of the department. And this my presentation I am dedicating to my teacher. And this is the NSU, Newborn Intensive Care Unit. This is the environment of NICU, Newborn Intensive Care Unit, for premature babies and high-risk babies and extreme low birth weight babies. And this is a premature baby, typical premature baby you can see in NICU. So when it comes to the optimal brain development of any child, decades of rigorous research shows that the children's earliest experiences play a critical role. This is very important, like what the child interact with, whom he is interacting, and what he's holding, and what he's smelling, and what he's touching. All these things definitely plays a role in the critical role, particularly in the brain development of any child. And what you do, what you eat, and what you experience during the first 1,000 days has lifelong consequences for your health, as McMullen 2009, he pronounced it very clearly. In pediatrics, early refers to the most critical period of child's development. Early means 0 to 3 years, that is from the day of conception till the 3 years of the age. And intervention means giving a child a variety of opportunities to experience and to explore and to play with the things around him. So early intervention is one of the important strategy every paramedical and medical personnel, even including parents, should administer. If you look at the birth, 100 billion neurons will be formed and 15 connections will be made. 85% still yet to connect. If you look at the age of 3 years, 10,000 connections will be formed to each neuron. 1,000 trillion connections already will be formed by the age of 3 years. And 2 million miles in length will be formed. So early intervention has to be initiated before, earliest, that is 0 to 3 years of the age. This is what the significance and importance of the early intervention program for optimal development of the child in all domains. 75% of the brain growth will be completed by 2 years of the age, and myelination almost completed by the 2 years, and gross motor and fine motor milestones greatly achieved to a great extent by 3 years of the age. And personality traits of any child will be stabilized by the age of 2 years. Not a significant change in the social patterns even after the age of 2 years. So 7 to 36 months, most young children acquire the ability to understand most of the language of anybody. So 0 to 3 years plays a crucial, role. So we need to initiate early intervention program before 3 years itself, maximum after when you identify the child with so and so developmental delay. And improving outcomes beyond survival for high-risk newborns in resource-limited countries is an emerging challenge nowadays the world is facing. So neurodevelopmental impairments, which are including like motor function deficits, like in the case of cerebral palsy, cognitive delay, and sensory impairments such as visual and auditory processing deficits. So all this comes under neurodevelopmental impairments. And the infants with the physical, social, adaptive, and cognitive developmental delay, early intervention services need to be initiated at earliest once you identify or screen the child with so-and-so developmental delay. Compensatory mechanisms exist for all cerebral function, and this plasticity, that is neuronal plasticity of the brain, is encouraged only by early intervention program. So neuronal plasticity of the brain can be encouraged only by early intervention program. This is a very important statement. And neonatal follow program, this is called NFP. This program is highly quality care. This is a high quality care provided to newborn babies who are at risk and who are at high risk, and the two with having neurodevelopmental delay or disabilities. So this program exclusively, it provides the high risk care, that is quality care for the risk babies. Most of the NSUs in the developmental countries or developed countries are adapting this program for high risk infants and very low birth weight infants. But unfortunately, in developing and underdeveloping countries, such as early detection or early identification and early intervention programs are rarely existing, which are very rare. Infants recovering from newborn intensive care unit may have residual neurobehavioral changes, such as developmental delays, specific learning difficulties, attention deficit and hyperactivity disorder, cerebral palsy, sensory processing deficits, including hearing problem, vision problem, and processing disorders, even language delays. So all these are very, very important, because infants recovering from NICU, who is recovering or discharging from NICU, definitely, certainly will be having one or other problem of among these. Up to 50% infants less than 1,000 grams birth weight have some kind of specific learning difficulties like dyslexia, or dysgraphia, or dyscalculia at school age. When you look at epidemiology, incidence and prevalence, preterm birth is truly a global problem. Countries with the highest preterm in numbers, including India, China, Nigeria, United States of America, Brazil, and many other countries. NICU admission rates are increasing with the decrease of gestational age. This is a very important. And genetics. When you look at the genetics, women who have had one infant born prematurely are at higher risk for a second premature infant. This is what the research is saying. And when it comes to recovery chances or prognosis, it has been improved dramatically over the past 4 decades. And associated comorbidity problems also can occur following the delivery or may unfold, such as chronic disabilities, neurodevelopmental disabilities, such as cerebral palsy, congenital impairments, even cognitive impairments, visual impairment, hearing impairment, feeding disorders like swallowing difficulties like dysphagia, and cardiac as well as respiratory conditions, and or behavioral disabilities like attention deficit and hyperactivity disorder, etc. So prognosis sometimes will be poor. In this case, it depends on the severity of the neurodevelopmental disability. And there are certain risk factors for this newborn, risk babies, like prematurity. Prematurity means that is deficits generally correlate with gestational age, birth weight, preterm birth associated with injuries to many organs or organic systems due to intranatal infections like after the baby delivery, immediately there is a chance of bacterial or viral infections and inflammatory conditions, and some kind of physiologic instability after the birth, like neonatal jaundice, neonatal sepsis, etc., required use of immature organ systems and insufficient endogenous protective factors like surfactant, cortisol, and thyroxine. And also there will be a kind of adverse and side effects of the treatment which is ongoing in NICU. So what are the causative factors or etiological factors for the developmental disorders for risk babies? So causes, if you look at, there are three types of causes. One is the prenatal or antenatal causes. Second is the natal. Third one is the postnatal. Prenatal is during the gestational period. Natal is at the time of delivery. And the postnatal is after the delivery. So if you look at the prenatal etiological factors, the age of the mother, which plays a crucial role. So the mothers who are having advanced maternal age, say for example, after 35 years of the age, there is a chance of Down syndrome like that. And also physical build of the mother, like, obesity mothers, definitely there will be a problem in giving rise to a, unhealthy child. And general health condition, whether the maternal mother is debilitated, lethargic, undernutritious, and abortions, like any early, like MTPs, medical termination of pregnancies, etc. And infections like torch infections like toxoplasmosis, rubella, and cytomegalovirus, and herpes infections, and sexually transmitted diseases, and diabetes, that is maternal diabetes, and RH factor, that is RH incompatibility, and certain drugs without prescription by the doctor if she takes, and chemicals and poisons exposure, and irradiation, like unnecessary exposure to the X-rays, radiographs, and alcohol and smoking habits during the pregnancy period, and blood infections, that is a toxemia, and injury like abdominal injury during the prenatal period, and a kind of psychological and emotional trauma if she faces during the pregnancy period. And of course, genetic and chromosomal abnormalities, like inherited from ancestors or earlier generations. And it comes to the natal etiological factors like prolonged labor and difficulty delivery at the time, and arrested labor, abnormal presentation like breech presentation, etc., and placenta previa, that is bleeding before delivery, and umbilical cord around the neck, which may leads to the respiratory cessation or respiratory arrest, and delayed birth cry, that is one of the very important, which leads to asphyxia neonatorum, and twins and multiple pregnancies, and LSCS, that is C-section, and forceps and vacuum extraction, and injury, any kind of injury at the time of delivery, and pre or post-term deliveries. All these comes under natal etiological factor or causative factors for the risk baby. And postnatal etiological factors after birth, certain bacterial and viral infections to the baby, and nutrition, that is low birth weight, and prematurity, and injury, and metabolic disorders like phenylketonuria, and mitochondrial disorders, and Tay-Sachs diseases, and endocrine disorders like hypothyroidism, as well as diabetes, etc. These are all the causative factors postnatally after the birth. And brain injury, that is intraventricular hemorrhage, is also one of the risk factor, and hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy, and stroke encephalomalacia, and periventricular leukomalacia, and hydrocephalus, microcephalus, and seizure disorder, that is neonatal seizures after the birth. And certain congenital and postnatal infections like cytomegalovirus, and herpes simplex virus, and HIV infection, and bacterial sepsis, and Zika virus, also one of the very latest postnatal infection causative factor. And congenital anomalies definitely increase the risk for the later neurodevelopmental disabilities. And CHD, that is higher rates of brain malformations, microcephaly, prolonged hypoxia, hypoxemia with cardiopulmonary bypass, and cardiopulmonary arrest, that is congenital heart diseases. And neonatal abstinence syndrome, like which is higher at risk with the polydrug exposure, because the infant has to expose to many drugs like antibacterial or antiviral drugs. So these drugs in excessive exposure, definitely there is a chance of neonatal abstinence syndrome. And respiratory failure and chronic lung diseases and intermittent hypoxia and acidosis also causative factors for the risk and high risk babies. And poor growth also one of the factor. And intrauterine growth restriction or retardation, IUGR, and genetic syndromes like Down syndrome, Turner syndrome, and etc. Severe neonatal illness like neonatal sepsis and necrotizing enterocolitis and retinopathy of prematurity. All these are all risk factors. If you look at the high risk factors for the risk and high risk babies, which are very commonest in developing and underdeveloped countries, like babies who born with less than 1,000 grams birth weight or gestational age less than 28 weeks. Major morbidities, comorbidities such as chronic lung diseases, intraventricular hemorrhage, and periventricular leukomalacia. Perinatal asphyxia neonatal, that is, if the child or baby scores Apgar score 3 or less at 5 minutes and are hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy, that is HIE. And surgical conditions are certain like diaphragmatic hernia, like a hole in the diaphragm, which is a chief respiratory muscle, and also tracheoesophageal fistula, that is from the esophagus, the food bolus, enters into the trachea. That is called tracheoesophageal fistula. And also small for date, that is less than third centile, and large for date, that is greater than 97th centile. These are all some of the high risk factors. And mechanical ventilation, the baby who is on mechanical ventilation more than 24 hours definitely will cause or leads to the development of certain neurodevelopmental disabilities. And persistent prolonged hypoglycemia and hypocalcemia, that is less blood sugar as well as less calcium. And also Shiza disorder and meningitis, that is inflammation of the meninges or the brain layers, that is dura mater, arachnoid, and pia mater. And shock requiring that inotropic and vasopressor support during the resuscitation treatment. Because the child who did not cry immediately, the child needs to be resuscitated. So during that, the inotropic and vasopressor drugs will be given. So for the shock. And the infants born to HIV positive mothers also, definitely there is a risk factor. And twin-to-twin transfusion and neonatal bilirubin encephalopathy and major malformations like VSD and ASD and congenital cleft palate. Inborn errors of metabolism and other genetic disorders also causative factors for the risk. Abnormal neurological examination at the time of discharge. It is very important to conduct a neurological examination at the time of discharge from the NSU. If the professional conducts a neurological examination at in a wrong way, this is also one of the risk factor. You cannot identify the child once the baby discharges from the hospital. And the babies who are at moderate risk are babies with weight of 1,000 grams to 1,500 grams, or gestational age that is less than 33 weeks. And twins and triplets also will be having moderate risk for neurodevelopmental disabilities. And moderate neonatal HIV, that is hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy, and hypoglycemia, that is blood sugar less than 25 m per dl. And neonatal infection or sepsis, which is generalized systemic infection, and hyperbilirubemia, that is more than 20 mg per dl, or requirement of exchange of transfusion. And intraventricular hemorrhage grade 2 also comes under moderate risk. And suboptimal home environment also certain times may cause or predispose the children with moderate risk for the neurodevelopmental disabilities. And the children who are at mild risk comes like preterm weight 1,500 grams to 2,500 grams. And this hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy grade 1 also comes under mild risk. And transient hypoglycemia and suspect sepsis, if there is an infection or probability of a neonatal sepsis, those children also comes under mild risk. And a neonatal jaundice needed phototherapy, those children also comes under mild risk. And intraventricular hemorrhage grade 1 children also comes under mild risk. And diagnosis. How to diagnose a child with neurodevelopmental disability or disorder? First of all, we need to take the proper history, which is both subjective history. And after that, later we can go for the objective or clinical examination. And birth weight plays a role, and gestational age of the mother also. And NSU, that NSU complications, like what are the complications generally will be developed during the neonate intensive care unit environment. And the length of the intubation and oxygen needed for the child also plays a role. And certain ototoxic medications like non-steroid anti-inflammatory drugs and certain antibiotics for this hearing problem, which may cause to hearing deafness. And umbilical lines like umbilical venous and arterial lines increase risk of hypertension secondary to renal artery or vein stenosis or thrombosis. And also at the time of discharge, certain medications with weaning plans also we need to see. And also what type of feeding the baby is undergoing or taking from the mother. This is also we have to take the history. And comes to the physical examination, we need to check the vital signs like respiratory rate and temperature and blood pressure. And of course, growth parameters, that is height, weight, and head circumference. Head circumference is because to detect whether the child is having microcephaly or hydrocephaly. And also mid-arm circumference and triceps and biceps skin fold thickness we need to measure, and growth velocity we need to measure in clinical examination, energy intake and energy expenditure of the baby, and bone density also. especially in children with hydrocephaly and as well as patient, that is, lack of head growth concerning as well as rapid growth. We need to take history. And also general physical examination focusing on muscle tone and motor function. This is also one of the very important, preferably in the case of gross motor or fine motor developmental delay. And certain hematological examination we need to conduct, like blood for hemoglobin, calcium, phosphate and alkaline phosphate, etc. And evaluation and diagnosis, how to evaluate baby with a neurodevelopmental disorder or a diagnosis also. So children who fail developmental screening may need further medical evaluation, like chromosomal or karyotyping, even cytogenetic testing, like in the case of the Down syndrome and Fragile X syndrome, as well as Prader-Willi Angelman syndrome. Certain techniques like karyotyping, that is chromosomal analysis, and fMRI, FMR1, as well as MECP2 genes, and the FISH technique, that is fluorescence in situ hybridization techniques, are greatly helpful to detect any kind of chromosomal anomalies or abnormalities. Electroencephalogram EEG, if suspected, if the child is having any seizure activity, like generalized seizure disorder or frontoparietal occipital seizure disorder, or any kind of underlying seizure disorder. And encephalopathy also, like Landau-Kleffner syndrome, we can identify these with the EEG. And creatine phosphokinase, that is CPK test and aldolase, we have to do if the baby's muscle tone is abnormal, like in the case of Duchenne's muscular dystrophy, that is DMD. And children who fail developmental screening may need further medical evaluation, like evaluation for the iron deficiency anemia, which is very important, and which is very commonly you can notice in developing countries, preferably like India and South Asian continent. And evaluation of the lead poisoning also, because metal poisoning is very common nowadays, you can see in the children with the autistic spectrum disorder. And formal hearing test, that is BERA, that is brainstorm evoked response audiometric examination. And fundus examination, you can go for as an ophthalmic examination for vision testing, and T3, T4, TSH, that is thyroid profile testing, and metabolic screening for mercury, lead, and chromium. And certain neuroimaging techniques also we can go for, that is MRI scan as well as CT scan, which will give a clear picture about any kind of structural or anatomical anomalies of the child. And diagnostic test as well as interpretation, how to do. As per American Academy of Pediatrics advice or guidelines, developmental screening guidelines, clinicians, preferably the neonatologist as well as the pediatricians, should not wait for referral to early intervention service when delay is suspected for these high-risk infants or babies. So once you identify any kind of developmental delay, immediately we need to refer to early intervention therapy or services, so that the child can learn or acquire the particular developmental milestone as soon as possible. And use age corrected for a degree of prematurity, that is corrected age, when assessing preterm infants until at least 2 years of chronological age. This is a very important. And certain goals and aims of neonatal follow-up program, that is NFP. So what are the goals? Early detection of any deviation from the normal child development in the future, and hence starting early intervention. So we have to arrest at least the progression of the particular developmental delay. For that, we need to make the child to enter into early intervention therapeutic intervention program. And also we need to educate the family, and also we have to take the family support for this neonatal follow program. And training of medical as well as paramedical professionals, also one of the aim of this neonatal follow program, and also facilitating research. So where the baby be followed up, and who should do the follow-up? So for the babies who are at having low risk, so those low risk babies should be seen by the pediatrician or primary care provider with objective to screen for any deviation in the growth as well as development. And for the babies who are at moderate risk, the neonatologist as well as developmental pediatricians can screen for any kind of developmental delay, or like gross motor, fine motor, personal, social, language, or sensory delay, any whatever it is. And also we have to treat the illness during the, preferably by the neonatologist for the babies who are at moderate risk. And there is a team, like multidisciplinary team for the newborn follow-up. So who are the people, who are the professionals who comes under this multidisciplinary team? So a neonatologist for the newborn baby who can take care of the baby up to the 1 month, and a neonate early interventionist, and the pediatrician, and a clinical psychologist, pediatric neurologist, and a physiotherapist and occupational therapist, speech language pathologist and audiologist, and a qualified nurse, clinical nurse, as well as multiple social workers, that is medical and psychiatric social worker, and lactation consultant, developmental or behavioral pediatrician, and ENT surgeon, and ophthalmic surgeon, orthopedic surgeon, pediatric endocrinologist, and pediatric geneticist. So these are the people who are, involved in the follow-up care of neurodevelopmental disability or a child with high risk or moderate risk or mild risk. And there are certain services provided by neonatal follow-up program. So what are the services generally we can offer under the neonatal follow-up program after the discharge from the NICU? Like neonatology services, like if the baby is having any kind of infections, and early intervention for the, to gain the optimal development of the baby, and ENT if the child is having any ear, nose, throat problem, and pediatric neurology if the child is having any kind of seizure disorder, clinical psychology for any kind of, psychological investigations or IQ test, etc. And general pediatrics if the child is having any kind of illness, and psychiatry if the child is having any kind of psychiatric disturbance like behavioral problems, audiology if the child is having any kind of hearing problem, and social service for the family support, etc. And ophthalmology if the child is having any kind of vision problem, and genetics if the child is having any kind of genetic syndrome, and physiotherapy if the child is having any kind of hypertonicity or hypotonicity, or etc., like in the case of cerebral palsy, and nursing care procedures, and occupational therapy like if the child is having any kind of sensory processing disorders, pulmonology if the child is having any kind of respiratory problems, and speech therapy and swallowing if the child is having any swallowing difficulties like dysphagia, and speech language developmental delay. And when it comes to the treatment of the child with high risk, so there are certain general measures can be taken, like prompt referral to early intervention programs is very important for infants and toddlers. And individualized family service plan also is very important, along with individualized education plan for the child with developmental delay. And continue close follow-up till the age of 2 years. This is a very important. We have to monitor the baby's follow up continuously, even if the child does not qualify for NSU clinic due to risk for ongoing school as well as learning problems. Because most of the children who are having borderline and mild problems, they may develop certain problems in the school like behavioral difficulties as well as learning difficulties. So we need to give continuous follow up till the age of 2 to 3 years maximum. And also home visits and home nursing, if available, can improve motor development, that is gross motor, fine motor development, and also interactions between parents and infants. And a sick neonate in newborn intensive care unit experiences significant adverse environment, because the baby who admitted in ICU, definitely, the baby will expose it to so many monitors and sounds and lights. Definitely this is a kind of adverse environment to the baby. And also there will be a separation from the mother also, so which is very stressful to the baby as well as to the mother both, and which can lead to the abnormal sensory input in the baby, which results in abnormal brain development as well as structure. So, and as a result, the child may develop developmental delay or developmental disability. So developmental supportive care is very important concept, which is very important, which is an intervention program for the preterm infants who are at high risk, that focuses on environment and is designed to minimize the stress of the neonate in an ICU environment. So developmental supportive care is one of the important strategy in which we can provide a certain environment to the brain of the child for optimal growth. Interventions aiming at enhancing parent-infant relationships. So whatever the interventions which we are giving to the child, that will enhance the parent-infant relationship. And there is evidence that early parent-infant interaction positively influences cognitive as well as social development in the child. Because whatever the interaction between the parent and child happens, it should directly positively influence the child's cognitive, that is intelligence, as well as social development. And the main aims of early intervention, that is to stimulate the child through normal development channel. So always we have to look at the normal development of the child, and we have to see where the child is lagging, in which domain the child is lagging, and we have to foster that development. And also we have to prevent certain developmental delays through early intervention and early stimulation program. And prevention of asymmetries, certain asymmetries, and also abnormalities like tone abnormalities in the children, and detection of transient abnormalities and minimization of the persistent abnormalities, like in this case of the cerebral palsy, as well as the child with attention deficit and hyperactivity disorder, or learning disabilities, etc. So the early intervention, the identification of early behavioral indicators, which can help families obtain appropriate diagnostic referrals and access early intervention services even before a definitive diagnosis is made. So please do not wait for the diagnosis. Before diagnosis, provisionally you can refer to early intervention services once you identify the child with any kind of developmental delay, as Woods and Weatherby clearly stated in the year 2003. And furthermore, early intervention can improve long-term benefits and outcomes for many children, as Dawson and Osterling quoted very clearly in 1997. So who are the population who requires really early intervention program? Like the children who are at biological risks, and the children who are at environmental risk, the children who are having developmental delays. So biological risk, environmental risk, and developmental delays, even as well as children from the 0 to 3 years of the age, with all disabilities, with all degrees of severity, all these children definitely needs early intervention program, like genetics as well as epigenetics and nutrigenetics. Three will plays a role here. Genetics is nothing but genetic transmission, and environmental, that is epigenetics, which plays a role in the child's personality as well as the health. And nutrigenetics, that plays a role, like nutrition of the child also plays a role. So all these children comes under early intervention program. So if you look at the definition as per the Segal in 1972, the early intervention is nothing but an introduction of a planned program, deliberately timed and arranged in order. So deliberately timed. So we have to deliberate with appropriate timely, arranged in order to alter the anticipated or projected course of development. So whatever the normal development, we have to, inject into the child through early intervention program. It may be a gross motor, it may be fine motor, it may be personal or social or speech or language or communication or sensory development. So in a systematic way, we have to plan priorly and we have to execute deliberately at the time appropriateness in order to alter the anticipated or projected course of development. So who needs an early interventions program or early stimulation program? So till now we studied about the neurodevelopmental risk, that is a moderate risk, high risk, and mild risk. So the babies at risk of neurodevelopmental disabilities based on the risk factors, and also initial assessment at the time of NSU, before NSU discharge and after NSU discharge. And early intervention must be started in the NSU itself once the neonate is medically stable. So when the baby becomes stable medically, immediately as soon as possible, we need to start the early intervention program at least till 1 year of age. So we should not discontinue early intervention therapy till the 1 year of the age after discharge from NSU. And also at the same time, we need to motivate, we need to educate, we need to psychologically reassure the parent, and also we need to educate the parent to stimulate the baby with the appropriate stimuli after going home. And what is done exactly in early intervention or early stimulation program? So assess the parenting skills and also educate the parents and stimulate the child in all sectors of development, that is multi-sectors like motor, cognitive, neurosensory, as well as language. Developmentally appropriate care we have to provide, that is through normal development channel. Stimulate to achieve the next milestone rather than age-based. So please do not look at the age of the child. You have to look at what is the current level of the functioning of the particular child or risk baby in a particular domain. And next, what has to be achieved, that you have to work out in early intervention program. And physical stimulation, that is nothing but giving passive exercises to prevent development of hypertonicity in the baby, like in the case of cerebral palsy. And here one caution is you should not overstimulate the baby, because research has proven that shown negative effects on development if you give more inputs or multiple inputs at a time. So that is very dangerous. So we should not overstimulate the baby with multiple sensory inputs. So gradually you have to introduce step by step. And specific interventions also there in early interventions other than the main, like motor impairment and hypertonicity child, you can go for medications as well as physiotherapy and occupational therapy, speech therapy. And if the child is having seizures, you can go for anti-epileptic drugs. And developmental dysplasia of the hip, that is DDH, as well as other orthopedic problems, and also squint correction if the child is having a squint or strabismus, and behavior modification therapy as well as pharmacotherapy for behavioral disorders like attention deficit and hyperactive disorder, and also therapy for specific learning disabilities. So you can go for all these interventions for the child who is at risk or high risk. And developmentally supportive care measures. So there are certain core measures. Which are the core measures which have to be undertaken for the child with high risk? First one is protective sleep. So protective sleep involves undisturbed sleep in which infant conserves energy and experiences weight gain and has optimal brain growth. So protected sleep is very important for infant who is in NICU. This is very important because sleep plays a vital role in the baby's weight gain as well as optimal brain growth. Example like caregiving activities. Whenever we are handling the baby in like caregiving activities that promote sleep, like facilitated tuck and swaddled bathing and skin to skin care and light and sound levels are maintained in NSV environment. Because in NSV environment, generally the monitor sounds will be disturbed like a noise, as well as the lights also, like the phototherapy lights also may disturb the baby. So all these care should be taken. And also pain and stress assessment and management. Management of pain and stress before and during and following all procedures, preferably the intravenous procedures, and also for pain procedures like pharmacological as well as non-pharmacological measures can be used. So for the pain and stress, we can go for non-pharmacological or pharmacological measures. So this is an example for this facilitated tuck and swaddling. This is facilitated tuck. You can see in the picture. I'll just show you one video here. So this is the way of swaddling the baby. The baby who is having risk and high risk, moderately risk, we have to do this swaddling so that it gives comfort to the baby, and we have to be very cautious regarding the usage of the cloths. And I will share another video right now. This is the developmentally support care. In this, there are two positions, as I said. One is supine position, second is prone position. But prone position is giving, much benefits rather than supine position. But American Academy of Pediatrics, AAP, is recommending supine position only because of various, rationale. But clinically, the prone position is having much benefits. I'm just showing a small video about the prone position of developmentally support position. Just have a look. So this is the mid prone position. We have to rotate the baby into the mid-prone position. Hips should be flexed, and we need to support from the top of the head of the baby. This position will not affect the baby's respiration. So the baby will respire very clearly as well as easily. And also this position gives very comfort position to the baby. So this procedure is called as containment. Now the containment procedure is taking place. Just have a look. First hips, then shoulders. This is for more comfort. So this is a very, very important positioning for the baby who is having on mechanical ventilation. And developmentally support care of daily activities of living, like positioning of the baby is very important, which provides comfort as well as safety and physiological stability and optimal neuromotor development. Educate caregivers, because caregivers are very important, like maybe grandmother or grandfather or even the mother and father. So we need to educate the parents about comfort, how to give comfort to the baby, and how to give a proper position to the baby, and also the safety measures. So the physiological stability is very important for this activities of daily living. And of course, last core is the family-centered core. The family-centered core measure including skin-to-skin care, holding, feeding activities, you have to feed the baby, in what position you have to keep the baby to feed, and activities of daily living, and as well as diapering, and also you have to sing to the baby. So these are all comes under family-centered core measure. And the healing environment in NICU generally, in NICU, sound should not exceed 45 to 50 decibels. And the ambient light levels range should be 10 to 600 LUX only. You cannot cross this light, as well as you cannot cross this, 50 dB preferably, because these are the noises which will disturb the baby, NSU baby. These babies may develop ADHD in future, attention deficit and hyperactivity disorder, as well as some kind of sensory processing difficulties. And developmentally supportive care, NICU, dim lights individual, like dim individual light units adjusted as per the cycles of the day. For example, night as well as day, we need to adjust the cycles, preferably during the daytime dim light you can go for, and during the night you can go for this bright light. And reduce unnecessary noises from the monitors, because the continuous monitors which makes the sound which will disturb the baby's brain also. So put the tape with recorded heartbeat sounds, and also mother voice and music near to the baby with less volume. You have to take care. We have to see whether the background sounds are are there or not. If the background sounds are there, you have to minimize the volumes. And do gentle massage, because gentle massage definitely will help for the tactile stimulation, which enhances the tactile stimulation in the NSU. And use kangaroo method to promote the bonding between the mother and as well as the child who is at risk, and introduce rocking as well as oscillating water beds in order to stimulate the kinesthetic and vestibular senses, preferably the neuromuscular facilitation and proprioceptive facilitation. This is a very important, but which is a very latest concept by using this rocking as well as oscillating water beds. And give passive exercises to the joints to prevent muscle spasms, preferably in the case of a child with cerebral palsy. Remember that, please, again, do not overstimulate the babies in ICU. and tactile intervention programs in a newborn intensive care unit. So what an occupational therapist or a neonatologist or a nurse can do, which enhances the tactile intervention or tactile stimulation. If the baby is acutely ill, minimal handling we have to go for, and containment, that is swaddling, and gentle touch without stroking. We should not stroke the baby. You have to touch the baby with a gentle touch. This is very important if the baby is acutely ill. And after medically stable, once the baby becomes medically stable, you can go for holding, and you can go for rocking gently and stroking, and continue to swaddle. This is a continuous we have to do. And a non-nutritive sucking reflex. It is an important oral tactile intervention program that supports both feeding as well as behavioral regulation program. It facilitates the importance of the physiologic as well as behavioral mechanisms. So nutritive sucking also is one of the very important, and non-nutritive sucking also important. So initially you have to go for non-nutritive sucking. And a tactile stimulation, like which helps in the development of emotional bonding and baby massage. Tactile stimulation, kinesthetic stimulation, you can use the bristles like this, even with your palms, etc. And vestibular intervention programs in NSU. You can use oscillating water beds with amplitude of 2.5 millimeters, which will induce sleep naturally and also organized motor behavior, decreases irritability nature of the baby, and increases visual alertness and increases somatic growth. Somatic growth means the physical growth of the baby. And the positioning of the baby is very important. Prone position in the NICU has been strongly supported. Why? Because it is associated with quiet sleep, and it improves the lung volumes and also obstructive sleep apnea, OSA. But still, it's a controversial whether it is supine position or prone position, because American Academy of Pediatrics, AAP strongly recommends still now the supine position only. But practically, prone position definitely will be useful in certain high-risk babies, which are proven. And nesting to keep limbs in flexion posture is one more important, and support the head as well as the midline to avoid the misshape of the baby. Avoid pressure on the upper spine, that is cervical as well as thoracic spine, neck area. Okay. And this is the vestibular stimulation examples: rocking, swinging, and walking. And kangaroo care. This kangaroo care is one of the very, very important, globally accepted. The infant is clad only in a diaper and placed under the mother's clothing between her breasts. So it's like a breast crawl. For the baby, it's a breast crawl, remaining there according to the mother's comfort, feeding on the demand. This technique provided multimodal stimulation. So it will definitely provoke multimodal stimulation, like what? Vestibular, kinesthetic, olfactory, visual. So how vestibular and kinesthetic? Infant's location on the adult's chest and being carried itself is a vestibular kinesthetic. And tactile is by skin to skin contact with the mother. And olfactory is through the mother's body proximity. That is, auditory means again through mother's voice. The mother, whatever she talks, whatever she sings, definitely the child will hear. And also visual, as the infant placed in an upright position, which allows the child to see the mother's face very clearly, crystal clearly. So it is a multimodal stimulation. Definitely it will be helpful for all babies who are at risk. Kangaroo care has to be adapted for all mild, moderate, and heavy risk babies. It can be given by the mother as well as father also to the baby who is at risk, that to high risk, or premature baby, or extremely low birth weight babies in NICU. So this facilitates the interaction between the parent and the child. This increases the baby's weight gain also. And gestatory intervention programs in NICU. So familiarizing the neonate baby with the odor or smell of breast milk can facilitate the feeding. So dropping of a small drop of breast milk on the tongue tip or lips will enhance the gustatory stimulation. So orogastric stimulation also leads to activation of endogenous opioid system. Then when it comes to the auditory intervention in NICU, reduce ambient noise, that is background noise, which is very important as already we discussed. So comes to this hearing stimulation, playing music, talking and imitation, greatly helpful to the babies. Visual intervention programs in NICU. Limit the ambient light, background light. A day-night cycling will improve the sleep pattern. This is a very important for high-risk baby. So these are the visual stimulation models, bold pattern with strong contrast, making faces and moving objects. Other intervention programs in newborn intensive care unit. Softly greet the baby prior to interaction. So whenever you approach the baby, whenever we are going to interact with the baby, we need to greet the baby softly in a soft voice. And also we need to sing slowly and move baby slowly and gently. So gentle touch is very important. And inform others to speak softly, whoever comes to see the baby, like grandparents or the family members. Silence mode of alarms and phones. So we have to keep the alarms as well as phones in silent mode. And dim NICU during the daytime and darker at night time. It is advisable for the babies who are at risk and high risk. And eyes and genital organs should be protected under the Billy lights. That is, Billy lights are nothing but when we are giving the treatment phototherapy to the jaundice, that is pathological jaundice treatment. So eyes and genitals should be protected under the Billy lights only. Wrap baby before holding out of cot. We need to wrap the baby with the clear and sterilized cloth before holding out of the cot, and answers the parents' questions in a kind manner. So for the neonatologist as well as a pediatrician or the nurse or early interventionist, whoever may be, we need to rectify the doubts, and also we need to clear the doubts of the parents in a polite manner and a kind manner. So active surveillance is required before discharge from newborn intensive care unit and in follow programs. Like pre-discharge. At the time of pre-discharge, we have to conduct medical examination of the baby, neurobehavioral and neurological examination, neuroimaging like ultrasound and CT scan and MRI scan, and retinopathy of prematurity screening and hearing screening examination, screening for any congenital hypothyroidism, screening for metabolic disorders like phenylketonuria, hypothyroidism, etc. Assessment of parent coping mechanisms as well as developmental environment also. We need to do all these at the time of pre-discharge. And comes to the medical evaluation, presence of biological risks or medical problems which are associated with the developmental delay only we have to do. Like head circumference we have to do for the child to identify whether the child is having microcephaly or macrocephaly, and weight and height as an anthropometric measure for the growth deficiency. And dysmorphological features we need to observe whether minor and major congenital anomalies. And eye examination, that is fundus examination for poor tracking or any kind of strabismus like unilateral or bilateral. And ear examination for any kind of recurrent or chronic otitis media. And abdominal examination for any kind of metabolic disease like diabetes, hypothyroidism. And skin again for neurocutaneous lesions. And neurological examination we need to conduct for reflexes as well as muscle tone and symmetry and strength of the muscle. And follow program, that is medical examination as well as neurological exam. That means whenever the child comes under our follow program, we need to conduct both medical as well as neurological examination to detect any kind of future developmental delays or probability of neurodevelopmental disabilities. And under medical examination, we have to conduct the nutritional state as well as growth, and also we have to give immunization or vaccines. And under developmental assessment we have to do with a card, that is developmental observation card, DOC. It is nothing but it is a self-explanatory card that can be used by the parents. In this 4 screening milestones will be there. One is social smile by 2 months, head holding by 4 months, sit alone by 8 months, stand alone by 12 months. Make sure the baby can see and hear and listen. So this is one of the card you can give to the parents, so the parents can identify if any kind of developmental deviation or developmental delay. And you can use certain other developmental assessment tools like Trivandrum Developmental Screening Chart and Denver Developmental Screening Chart, and also Developmental Assessment Scale for Indian Infants, DASI. And at the same time, we need to conduct ophthalmological examination to detect any kind of squint or strabismus or any kind of refraction or refractive errors. And hearing and language assessment, speech function also we have to go. And behavioral cognitive intelligence or IQ test also should be done at the time of follow-up. In newborn intensive care unit, all very low birth weight infants who are referred to early intervention programs at the time of discharge from the NICU. So very low birth weight infants should refer to early intervention therapeutic services. If a developmental assessment is needed before 12 months of the age to establish eligibility for early intervention program, a 6 to 8 months corrected age evaluation can be recommended by using Bailey scale, which is revised scale. So these are the areas of developmental domains. One is the motor and sensory, speech, language and communication, social, emotional and cognitive. So these are the developmental domains which we need to do under developmental assessment. And neurobehavioral assessment of preterm babies or infants. This is very important. It can be used for babies between 32 weeks of gestation and term, which including motor development and vigor. Scarf sign is nothing but the elbow of risk baby will cross the midline without any resistance, and the popliteal angle like to detect any kind of the tone of the muscle, or I mean abnormal tone in the hamstring muscles. And of course alertness and orientation can be tested in this, irritability, vigor, as well as crying, and also percentage of sleep ratings you can assess under this NAPI, that is neurobehavioral assessment of preterm infants. And it comes to the neurological examination of high-risk baby, infants with mild or moderate abnormalities definitely improve within the time. This is known as transient neuromotor dysfunction. And in growing brain with plasticity, many infants become normal. Because of the neuronal plasticity, many infants who are at mild risk becomes normal. And Emil Tyson scale, this is one of the important scale. Evaluation of the tone is a fundamental part of this assessment in this Emil Tyson scale. So the assessment is done under the following headings. So main domains under this scale are neuromotor, that means tone in upper limb, lower limb and axial. So tone of muscle tone in upper limb, lower limb, as well as axial can be measured with this. And neurosensory, that is hearing as well as vision. And neurobehavioral, that is arousal pattern, quality of cry, and suckling and swallowing. So these will be tested under the neurobehavioral domain. And finally, the head growth, head circumference and also skull for sutures, and size of the anterior fontanelle. So these are the main 4 core areas or domains you can use or tested in Emil Tyson scale. So this test schedule generally at the age of 3 months, and follow-up 6 months of follow-up, 9 months of follow-up, 12 months of follow-up, you can do this. Assessment of passive, that is passive tone Emil Tyson in the first year of life is a very, very useful tool in early detection of gross motor, fine motor developmental delay. So the children who are having or suspected gross motor and fine motor developmental delay, this scale or tool can be greatly useful. And Hammersmith scale, that is neonatal infant neurological examination at the time of discharge, and which is periodically indicated and also useful to assess posture of the baby and muscle tone of the baby, and also muscle tone patterns and reflexes of the baby and movement patterns, abnormal signs or patterns, orientation and behavior of the baby. So these are the main core areas you can assess under Hammersmith neonatal infant neurological examination. So the first visit of the neurodevelopmental evaluation can be done at 8 to 9 months corrected age for preterm baby. And detailed developmental evaluation is done by the use of revised Gesell's developmental schedules. At the age of 12 months corrected age, a more varied behavioral repertoire is available, and cognitive process or intellectual processes and emerging language can be assessed at the age of 12 months. Evaluation at this age also encourages the family involvement in the program. So you can involve the family, entire family members in this assessment at the age of 1 year, corrected age. And the age of 1.5 years, that is 18 months to 24 months corrected age, environmental factors, that is epigenetics, plays a role. So begin to exert a stronger influence on test results. Preferably the intelligence, cognitive, gross motor, fine motor, abilities to diverge, and speech language and reasoning skills are also developing. And a potential problem is that many IQ tests have weak floors at this stage. That means you cannot expect exact IQ of the child at the age of 18 to 24 months because of so many environmental factors influence, thereby restricting use of to developmental test. At the age of 3 to 4 years, at this age, the intelligence can be first assessed properly and formally, as well as the concept development will be taking place, like this shape concept, size concept, color concepts, etc., pre-academics, and also early indicators of executive function and visual motor integrative abilities also the child can achieve. So here verbal and non-verbal skills can be better differentiated at the age of 3 to 4 years. And at the age of 6 years, like approximately first grade, by this age, a variety of tests and procedures can be used to pay, like, about attention and concentration problems in the child, and also the school achievement, like, a kind of learning disabilities also can be assessed. And at the age of 8 years, IQ test can be done, neuropsychological functions and specific learning developmental disabilities like dysgraphia, dyslexia, dyscalculia, and school performance and behavioral adjustment can be adequately assessed at the age of 8 years. So hearing screening is indicated to all newborn intensive care unit graduates before the discharge. Up to 50% abnormal hearing screens can occur in NICU graduate. So there is a chance of 50% of probability that the babies, can get hearing problems. Up to 10% of the preterms infants may have severe sensory neuronal hearing loss. Severe sensory neuronal hearing loss up to 10%, that is SNHL. And hearing screening examination. All preterm babies are at risk for hearing deficiencies, especially those on assisted ventilation for prolonged periods of time in the NICU, and those are receiving the ototoxic medications like gentamicin, tobramycin, and loop diuretics, even some kind of other antibiotics. These are the children who are having susceptibility and having proneness to develop the hearing problems. And all preterm infants should have their hearing tested prior to discharge, as said earlier. Objective screening could be either an otoacoustic emissions test or an automated auditory brainstem response, that is ABR. Infants with risk factors should have at least one audiological examination at the age of 24 months to 30 months, must, even if the newborn hearing screen was normal. So it is a mandatory protocol that the baby should attend evaluation program of a hearing at the age of 24 months to 30 months. And when it comes to vision screening, that is retinopathy of prematurity is a disease of immature retina, that is abnormal retinal vascularization in the preterm infants that leads to total blindness in preterm infants. So all preterm babies, lesser than 30 weeks, gestational age lesser than 1,500 grams are screened at 4 weeks of chronological age, whichever comes later. So the pediatricians should be aware that these infants may also develop other unrelated eye problems such as strabismus and also refractive errors, and that these need to be investigated, which is very important for vision screening. And when it comes to nutritional aspect under follow-up, preterm infants have a high need for protein like iron, calcium, phosphorus, sodium, vitamins B12, B6, and also D, and vitamin E and vitamin K, and trace minerals such as zinc, copper, magnesium, selenium, carnitine needs to be matched in their diet. When available, human milk should be given priority for feeding preterm infants. Why? Because these are associated with improved long-term neurodevelopmental outcomes and fewer rehospitalization. That is why globally we say the breast milk is the best milk. The mother's milk should be fed to the baby who is at risk. Unfortified human milk does not provide sufficient calories and nutrients for preterm babies. So breast milk can be fortified with liquid fortifiers, and preterm formulas contain adequate quantities of nutrients, such as that the preterm infants has weight gain, body composition, bone mineralization similar to full-term babies. So this is the very important. Formula feeding also is having beneficial effect. And vitamin D supplementation is very important, because if the mother is having vitamin D deficiency, it is important for the baby who is at risk should be administered vitamin D, like 200 to 400 international units per day is essential. And when it comes to immunizations or vaccination, preterm infants should be immunized according to their chronological age. We should not ignore the vaccination for preterm or risk babies. Infants born weighing less than 2000 grams should start their hepatitis B vaccine series at 1 month of chronological age, or at discharge time if being discharged at younger than 1 month of age. And for preterm infants with prolonged hospitalization in NICU, should receive immunization as per their chronological age, except for live vaccines. Infants being discharged from the NICU between 6 weeks and 14 weeks should receive the first dose of the rotavirus vaccine. This is very important. After discharge, the vaccines should be administered in pediatrician's outpatient clinic. So that there are certain areas which we need to assess. So what are these areas under follow-up programs or follow-up protocols? Like first one is intelligence, which including verbal and non-verbal aspects and executive function, and achievement tests, and functional status examination, which including self-care, like self-help skills, and also like, brushing, bathing, toileting, grooming, etc. And mobility and how the child is mobile, and communication, like expressive language and receptive communication, and the language, that is phonological awareness, syntax, and verbal influency, and also a comprehension of the instructions, and the speed naming, higher order abstracting functions. So the verbal fluency can be tested in the language. So all these 4 areas should be tested as a follow-up program. And also sensory motor functions like visual motor precision and fine motor speed, and visual spatial processing. Visual spatial processes like designing, copying, visual closure, and memory and learning like list learning, delayed recall, narrative memory, and use of semantics and pragmatics, strategic and rote memory, and episodic verbal and visual tasks. So these are all comes under memory and learning list. And comes to the behavioral adjustment like attention deficit and hyperactive disorder, internalizing and externalizing behaviors of the child, and how the child is functioning in the society. This comes under behavioral adjustment. So these are the main areas of assessment which we need to conduct as a follow program. And when it comes to ongoing care of risk and high risk and very risk babies, under follow-up recommendations, preferably in the case of cerebral palsy, CP. So CP, if you look at this, is non-progressive motor coordination and planning disorder, which is due to the injury or early lesion or early insult to the developing brain or malformation of the developing brain. So CP rates increases with decreased gestational age. The most common type of cerebral palsy is spastic diplegia. It is a gross motor functional classification scale. So there is a scale to measure the severity of the cerebral palsy in Western countries. That is a gross motor functional classification scale, GMFCS, which can be used. So this scale can be used from 18 months, that is 1.5 year age, and up to 12 years. And this scale contains a scoring system of gross motor skill levels by direct observation of the child. So we need to observe the child and we need to score and we need to interpret the results. And when it comes to minor neuromotor dysfunction as a follow program, mild motor impairments such as early marked head preference and overflow movements and poor handwriting skills, visuospatial skills, and sensory motor integration problems, and also adversely affect the child's self-help skills and self-esteem. So this is all comes under minor neuromotor function which need to be assessed under the follow program. And when it comes to intellectual disabilities, defined as performance more than 2 standard deviations below mean on intelligence plus adaptive function tests, which increases with decreasing gestational age. 10% of the children born at gestational age less than 32 weeks, and up to 50% in children born gestational age less than 26 weeks. Definitely you can see the intellectual disability in these two categories children. And higher rates, you can see the intellectual disability in neuroimaging abnormalities, like in the case of IVH, that is intraventricular hemorrhage, and hydrocephalus, and of course, white matter injuries. Prematurity generally shifts IQ baseline down by 10 points, and IQ scores decrease by 1 to 2 points for every week that is lesser than 33 weeks. And strongly affected by environment, that is parental education, socio-economic status of the child, family, and of course genetics. So genetics and epigenetics both will show impact on the intellectuality of the child. And cognitive impairment is the most common impairment among the high-risk infants. So Malin's intelligence scale for Indian children, Sigmund Farm Board, and Vinland social maturity scale, and Wessler's intelligence scale revised, and Bender Gestalt test, wide range achievement test, human figure drawing test. These are the investigations or the tests can be used as a follow-up to test or assess the cognitive skills. And comes to the visual impairment, cortical visual impairment, CVI, and retinopathy of prematurity, and optic nerve hypoplasia, we need to investigate or assess. 37% of the significant visual impairments in children attributable to prematurity. And CVI, that is cortical visual impairment, often underdiagnosed by the ophthalmic surgeons, and visual processing disorder, and associated with occipital cortex injury, that is the posterior accept of the lobe. I mean, posterior lobe will be having some problem in the cortical visual impairment. That means there will be some problem with the pathways of the vision. So, which can improve with specific visual and educational interventions for the children with visual impairment, like visual tracking, visual gazing, visual fixation, and showing the bright color objects, like certain things. And when it comes to retinopathy of prematurity, which presents at the 32 weeks and which will peak at 38 to 40 weeks, it will regress again at 46 weeks. So 84% of the children born at the gestational age less than 28 weeks have some degree of retinopathy of prematurity, out of which 40% of those born less than 26 weeks require definitely laser surgery. And this ROP can lead to retinal detachment and blindness. And other visual problems also should be detected as soon as possible, like reduced visual acuity, amblyopia, and also strabismus, that is nystagmus, and also strabismus, that is squint, and myopia. Follow-up eye examination should be conducted at the age of 1 year, that is 12 months, corrected for a degree of prematurity if the child is having gestational age less than 32 weeks. And squint and refraction assessment should be done by 12 months, and also irrespective of ROP. For example, if the child is not having ROP, but still every child should be on assessment by 9 to 12 months of the age. And when it comes to hearing impairment, 10 to 20-fold higher among newborn intensive care infant versus term infants, and higher risk with prolonged oxygen use. So the babies who are on prolonged oxygen use, definitely there is a probability of the child may develop hearing impairment. 3% mild to moderately severe hearing loss, 2% profound hearing loss. Sensory neuronal hearing loss is a very commonest and most common and prevalence, and 50% congenital, 50% acquired. That is due to gentamicin and furosemide. Central nervous system diseases and craniofacial defects also may precipitate. If high risk, and recheck hearing every 6 months for 3 years. So for 3 years, we need to check for every 6 months. As hearing loss onset delayed, like previously the child is normal maybe on ABR in 10%. 28% have progressive loss between the test. So hearing impairment, we need to check as a follow program. It is also mandatory protocol. Early identification and early treatment for this hearing impairment should be initiated. That is the American Sign Language and hearing aids by using cochlear implants. All these are critical for the language development. Hence, we need to start early intervention as soon as possible. And the language domain, preterm infants have high risk of language developmental delay and language-based learning disabilities. The first year problems with early speech perception, auditory discrimination, that is discriminative versus non-native phonemes or sounds, and fewer vocalizations. There will be a delay in babbling, less phonologic complexity, and smaller receptive lexicon. At the age of 12 to 24 months, smaller expressive lexicon you can observe. So the language assessment should be conducted at the age of 9 months and at the age of 18 months, that is 1.5 years, by using LEST test. This is exclusively for the children from 0 to 3 years. That is Language Evaluation Scale Trivandrum. And when it comes to the behavioral spectrum, attention deficit and hyperactivity disorder like behaviors are 2 to 6 times higher in premature infants, more often correlating with the inattention as well as slow processing disorder. Increased risk for comorbidity internalizing disorders like anxiety disorder and depression disorder. Poorer social and communication skills, and autism rate is higher in 4 to 8% in children born at gestational age less than 28 weeks. So the child who born less than 28 weeks of gestational age, there is a chance or probability of ASD, autism spectrum disorder. For behavioral assessment, CBCL scale can be used, that is Achenbach Child Behavioral Checklist, which is based on the parental perception of children's behavior, designed to assess the social competence skills and behavioral problems, and which can be used from the 1 year, 5 months to till 5 years of age. And when it comes to executive function, cognitive control is used to plan generally, to organize, approach the tasks. Preterm children have lower scores on visual and working memory, and also cognitive flexibility, sustained attention, response inhibition, fluency, and planning. So we need to examine or assess the executive function of the child who is with preterm. And specific learning difficulties or disabilities. Low scores on tests of reading, writing, spelling, mathematics in setting of normal IQ, adequate education. Higher rates in preterm children for mathematics, which is highest reading, and spelling, and most gestational age, that is less than 31 weeks, but present in the late preterm. And higher rates of specific learning disabilities and special education usage with a moderate to severe HIE, that is hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy. Encephalopathy is very common. SLD is very commonly, you can notice, even in children with respiratory failure and intrauterine growth retardation, and also bacterial and viral infections which are congenital by birth. And osteopenia of prematurity is another problem. Increased risk with low gestational age, prolonged intravenous nutrition, long-term ventilation in NICU, and high usage of the steroids, and also antibiotics, anticonvulsant, and drugs. So American Academy of Pediatrics recommends all breast and formula feed infants with less than 1000 ml of vitamin D fortified milk per day should be supplemented with 400 international units of vitamin D daily. Premature babies may need up to 1000 international units daily. So osteopenia of prematurity is also one of the commonest problem you can see in the premature babies. Anemia of prematurity. Preterm infants have low iron at birth, high requirements due to rapid growth rates. So iron is very, very important for our brain development because synapse function and brain myelination takes place with these only. 2 mg per kg per 24 hours of iron until 1 year corrected. Formula fed babies get in iron in formula. Breastfed babies should be supplemented with iron. And feeding challenges also commonest problems which you can notice in the children with premature babies. And integration of sucking, swallowing, breathing can be delayed in preterm infants, that is later than 33 to 36 weeks post-menstrual age. Later preterm infants will be having poorer state of organization skills, and they are sleeper, and latch challenges also they'll be having. The risk of poor feeding outcomes increases with medical problems. Higher rates of feeding problems at 2 years of infants with birth weight less than 1000 grams, up to 33% may need gastrotomy surgery. And seizures, definitely you can give follow-up with the pediatric neurologist with anti-seizure drugs or anti-epileptic drugs. Seizures in neonatal period do not necessarily predict later childhood seizures. Sometimes some parents may say that during the early infancy my child got seizures. Later, whether my child will get or not. It is not mandatory, it is not compulsory, or it is not necessarily you can predict later childhood seizures in the case of these child who get seizures. And parental stress is another very, very important and commonly ignored area. NSU parents, that is newborn intensive care in parents, have higher rates of potential mood disorders, including like postpartum depression and post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety disorders, and obsessive compulsive disorders. All have been shown to affect the children's developmental trajectory. So we need to counsel the parents, and we need to psychologically, emotionally reassure the parents of the children with prematurity. And patient teaching also very important. We need to educate the parents like about some sleep recommendations like back to sleep, remove soft bedding, blankets, toys, pillows, and bumper pads out of baby's sleep area. And room sharing but not bed sharing is recommended. Avoid standing activities until infant pulls to stand on the furniture. Hand toys to each hand, even if the child has a preference of right or left-handedness. Talking and reading to the infant is very, very important. So finally, how long follow-up should take place? Most of the follow-up studies in the research follow the infant for a short term, that is maximum 1.5 years to 24 months, that is 2 years of age. But longer term follow-up challenges are of cost, tracking, and feasibility. Preferably in underdeveloping countries and underdeveloped countries, the long-term follow-up is very, very challenging. Why? Because the cases generally comes from the rural area, and once the baby discharged, they may not come as a follow-up. So there will be a record missing as well as follow-up care also missing. At least the baby should give follow-up even at the nearest health center for the pediatrician or a primary health care giver. So this is the algorithm for follow-up of at-risk neonates finally. So at-risk neonate, we have to start immediately as soon as possible early intervention or early stimulation program. At the time of pre-discharge, we have to assign the medical examination, we have to conduct nutrition examination, growth assessment, and neurological examination, that is to know the neuro behavior of the baby who is at risk, and neurosonogram and retinopathy of prematurity screening, hearing screening, thyroid screening, we have to do metabolic profile, assessment of parent coping mechanisms and support services at home and community medical facilities. After that, as a follow program, again, we need to conduct medical examination, nutrition examination, growth examination, neurological examination, developmental tests, and functional assessment and behavior test, cognition, psychoeducational assessments. And timely specific interventions we need to adapt and we need to practice. So the suggestions which I made here is all health facilities caring for sick neonates must have a follow program as a protocol. It requires establishment of a multidisciplinary team including all medical and paramedical professionals. The schedule for follow-up must be planned priorly before discharge from the birth admission from NSU. Prior to discharge, a detailed medical, neurological, neurosonogram, ROP, hearing examination should be conducted. A psychosocial assessment of the family is also very important to be conducted. The follow-up protocol should include assessment of growth, nutrition, development, vision, hearing, and neurological status. Formal developmental assessment must be performed at least once in the year and repeatedly yearly till the age of 6 years of life. In Indian context, DASI is the best formal test for developmental assessment till 2 years, 6 months of the age. Ideally, the follow-up should continue till late adolescence, at least till school, as many cognitive problems like learning problems like dyslexia, dysgraphia, dyscalculia, and behavioral problems like ADHD, etc., that are more common in at-risk babies are apparently only on longer follow-up. So we have to give follow-up till the age of adolescence. Early intervention must be started in the NSU once the neonate is medically stable. So once the medically stable, then only you need to start early intervention. If the baby is not stable medically, you cannot start early intervention program. So the conclusion is proper neonatal follow-up programs are needed to improve neonatal outcome. Therefore, all professionals working in the field of neonatal care, including neonatologists and pediatricians and paramedical professionals in developing countries, should cooperate to create such programs for early detection or early identification and hence early intervention for any adverse long-term outcome in high-risk newborn infants. So early intervention leads to better outcomes. As I said, children make greater gains when they enter program, that is early intervention program, at a younger age. So we need to catch them at a very young age. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. It was such an exhaustive presentation. I mean, I learned so much. I was watching every bit of your presentation.
Comprehensive.
Very, very comprehensive, and you covered every aspect of it. Now, and you know, in the first few slides, you said that 50% of children who are or who were in NICU will have some difficulty or the other. I think if you can just say that again, so that parents and professionals listen to it and stress how important early intervention is.
Yes, early intervention has to be initiated right from the NICU itself. Because the babies who are having biological risk, environmental risk, and other risks, genetic risk, definitely will be having one or other developmental delays, are going to develop any kind of neurodevelopmental disabilities. Like it may be a cerebral palsy, or it may be a ASD, that is autism spectrum disorder, or it may be an intellectual disability, or it may be a sensory difficulty, or it may be some multiple disability. So we need to start as soon as possible once the delay observed by the pediatrician or neonatologist or healthcare professional, even the mother or father, whoever may be. Don't wait for the diagnosis. Just see, there are three times. One is provisional diagnosis and differential diagnosis. So when you identify, screen that the baby is having some kind of delay, immediately we need to initiate the particular early intervention program to that particular baby in the particular developmental milestones. The milestones may be a gross motor, physical, that is, walking, talking, walking, sitting, standing, creeling, cropping, whatever it is, that is gross motor. Fine motor, that is hand functioning, or some kind of, like cognitive or intellectual or speech, language, communication, sensory, whatever the development, we need to start immediately. When we are talking about this early intervention for the NICU graduates, we have to start as soon as possible. That is before discharge from NICU itself. So in NICU, mostly in developmentally support to care unit, the occupational therapist role is very important and crucial, and also early interventionist role, because these are the people who starts early intervention in NICU itself. So before discharge, at the time of discharge, and after discharge, early intervention is here three types. One is before discharge, and during discharge, and after discharge. But what is happening in developing countries and underdeveloped countries, the baby is coming to the professionals at the time of 1 year of age or 1.5 years or 2 years. My child is not speaking, my child is not walking. These are the complaints generally they comes to us. Yes. So this has to be initiated. The early intervention program or early stimulation program should be initiated right from NICU, I want to say. Yes. I can say the day one of conception, 0 to 3 years, actual early intervention, because critical and crucial period is 0 to 3 years. Yes. So 0 means day one of conception only. That means during the prenatal period itself, we need to educate the maternal mothers what care should be taken, what type of environment, home environment she should be exposed, what type of diet she should have, and what type of medications she should take from the prescribed by the gynecologist or obstetrician. See, these are the things we have to. So early intervention starts from the, I can say early intervention starts from the adolescent age. Adolescents, that is the from 13, 14, 15, 16 only, because iron deficiency will be there, B complex deficiency, and also zinc deficiency, vitamin D3 deficiency. All these deficiency will cause for a girl who is adolescent girl, we need to educate there itself during the puberty stage onwards, so that she will take care, so that we can prevent the developmental disabilities in the country. Yes. Because incidence and prevalence of early, developmental disabilities are increasing in developed countries and underdeveloping countries also. So we need to cater the needs.
We just completed a series of, digital campaign on our website and on our social media handles on the first 1,000 days. It's still going on actually. The 3 months is first 1,000 days, how important the first 1,000. We come much later into the picture, but they can start much before. They don't need
exactly. We need to start before. Exactly. Not 1,000 days. I can say during the after puberty stage itself. After puberty, every girl should be educated in every country.
Yes.
Preferable. That is why I say every woman should be educated
Yes.
so that she will take care of her
Yeah.
children, family. So
Yes.
the disability prevalence and incidence can be controlled, can be minimized. Yes.
Absolutely, doctor. I mean, can't agree more. And also when we take the history, as you said, yes, at least 50% of children who come to our centers when they are 1.5, 2 years with some delay, in the history, there will be NICU written. The kid was in NICU for at least 2 days, 3 days.
Yes.
And then we dig deeper, then there are more and more problems.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Yes.
Actually, in India and this in underdeveloping and underdeveloped countries, the research in this area is very less, madam. Very, very less. We need to concentrate on all disability children's case sheets as a retrospective study, explorative in nature, so that at least we can understand in NSU what is happening to the particular baby who is having developmental disability, whether it is autism or cerebral palsy or Down syndrome or whatever, intellectual disabilities or multiple disabilities. What happened during NSU stay? Whether it happened with oxygen or undernutrition or or some kind of excessive medication. What was the main reason or cause or etiological factor? Who is at risk or high risk or moderate risk or mild risk? So we can minimize these risks by study, by conducting a research. So research is highly required in this NSU area, preferably. Yes.
And have you seen the APGAR scores, how they are related to their...
APGAR score. APGAR score is very important. After once the baby born, immediately the neonatologist or a pediatrician will conduct, APGAR score test. The babies who is at mild risk and moderate risk and high risk, the APGAR score itself will be give a picture like less than 5 or, high risk, less than 6, a mild risk, like that, up to 7 it will be there. It's like consisting of a tone and color and breathing pattern, heart rate, pulse rate, everything will be there in that. Temperature, everything. So APGAR
but I don't see that. I don't see, and parents don't know. When I ask them, do you have discharge summary? Have you seen your child's APGAR score? None of the parents have any information.
Because at the time you need to ask the discharge summary, because every discharge summary from any hospital will be having, definitely will be mentioned about APGAR score. Definitely. For example, most of the corporate hospitals nowadays, they are having neonatologists. Definitely, it is a duty of the neonatologist to write the APGAR score. In most of the rural area and district hospitals, they may not write about APGAR score. Just they will write about the preterm or term, like that, post-term, that's it. Right? With certain complications and what are the treatment has been given. That's it. And follow-up programs are vitamin D3 and vitamin K. They will write this much only.
And we don't even know if they've taken it, they've given it, or God knows what's happening to those children. But there's so much work, so much awareness needs to be spread, right? As you said, rightly, from school itself, from high school itself.
Exactly.
For women and for men, because these boys will become eventually husbands of these, husband to some girl. And I think the parents have to be in it together. And now that there's so much information on the internet, on YouTube, they can watch videos, educate themselves, and understand how important the conception till birth, and then birth onwards 3 years. It's the most important couple of years for both the parents.
Even screening during the pregnancy period. Nowadays, exposure to the screens.
Oh God.
Pregnancy period also definitely, certainly 100% will be having even borderline effect on the developing brain of the fetus. No
and
doubt.
also, sir, recently I was talking to one extremely senior, very senior OT from Australia, and she was telling me that she's now working with children with vestibular difficulties. So many children are coming, and she was telling that in her history, when she takes history, she found that mothers of these children had desk jobs during pregnancy. They were in front of the computers.
Exactly.
The child was not stimulated when he was in the womb. He or she was in the womb. The mother was not moving. So there was no stimulation at all for the child.
Because we are living in the world of radiation. We are using LED bulbs. We are using PCs, laptops, tabs, screens, electronic gadgets, everything machinized, mechanized. So what is happening? Definitely there will be a kind of some radiation to our brains and bodies. So naturally, the people who are working in IT sectors, they are susceptible and having proneness to develop these kind of problems. So sincerely, take care, minimize. Then only, otherwise what happens, the next generation progeny will be affected. So our children should be healthy without any kind of neurodevelopmental disabilities, because developmental disabilities throughout lifelong. The parents, it's a burden for the parents and community and society and family.
Yeah.
So throughout life, they will be under depression, frustration, obsessive, there are so many anxiety disorders, depressive disorders.
Yes.
So many are developing. So that is why I'm suggesting public health programs are required.
Yes.
Public campaigns are required. Even at school education, we have to introduce. Earlier, we introduced about sex education. Why can't we use this kind of education to the young girls?
Yes.
And young boys in the schools itself, even at the junior colleges, degree colleges, so that we can invest. I am sure and confident that every girl will definitely listen, because every girl want to give a healthy child. Am I right? So we expect a healthy family, healthy. Definitely they will listen, they will follow our advice and recommendations. So like you people should conduct this kind of programs.
We will, sir. We will be looking forward to more talks and awareness
Yes.
sessions from you.
Yes.
Thank
Because
you so much.
practical things are very important than the theoretical.
Absolutely.
That's
Yes,
what.
sir. And
Thank you.
I mean, I know that you have a busy schedule, and you have taken time out of your schedule and agreed to speak with from our just couple of weeks before we contacted you. Thank you so much. And I'm sure all the students will be benefited. Especially, there are a lot of students who have registered, so I think they're starting careers with a lot of information and awareness. And thank you once again.
I appreciate Kids Sense Connect as well as Marshall University, United States of America, for taking this initiative for conducting this early intervention summit for the first time in India, national-wise. I hope definitely it is going to be successful, no doubt, because you brought many professionals, multi-rehabilitation professionals and medical professionals to one common platform, so that everyone delivered their own individualized specialty subject. Definitely it will reach the audience, preferably the researchers, therapists, doctors, and parents. I hope it is going to be successful. Thank you once again for giving me this opportunity, madam.
Thank you, sir.
To deliver my session. Thank you.
Thank you so much.